latest episode of the Kansas Moonshot Podcast, where we are shining the spotlight on amazing things happening in schools from across the state. Whether you're one of the Mercury, Gemini, or Apollo schools launching some amazing redesign plans, or a teacher trying to do something a little different, I want to share your story. The goal is to celebrate the awesomeness all around us. Now, this week's episode is another one of those no interview this week because I just wanted to celebrate and talk about something that happened this weekend. Saturday, if hopefully many of you were a part of it, we had our EdCamp Johnson County, and it was phenomenal. We had over 100 educators all gathered at Olathe West High School for an EdCamp. I'll be honest, it was my very first EdCamp ever, and I loved the experience. If you are not familiar with EdCamp, the way it works is, at least the way ours worked, was there was this giant board with room numbers at the top, time slots on the side, and it was blank. Now, we had a few student sessions that were already prearranged, pre-scheduled, plus a couple of spotlights. For example, Tara Martin was there presenting on book snaps, and we had my school was there talking about school redesign. But other than that, it was a completely open board, and it was great because teachers got together and said, hey, I really want to share about gamification, or I would love to share about Skyping in the classroom, or I want to know more about this topic. And so as people came up with topics, they were posted on the board, and then the sessions kicked off, and you just went to the rooms that meant the most to you. And it was amazing to see there were teachers off to the side. The amazing thing, if you haven't been to Olathe West, is it is such a great learning space because there are side rooms that you can go into for smaller conversations. There were big workrooms you could go to. There were all these great moments of people engaging and learning together. I had so many phenomenal conversations with educators. Some people were asking me questions about redesign, and so I shared our perspective. I had some conversations with people about standards-based grading. I talked to some people about podcasting. So it was just a great time for people to come together. But the thing that I was the most impressed by was the team that came together and brought everything together. Now, this was an idea that Ariel Jenkard brought to us at one of our podcasting meetings for the Olathe Spark Starters podcast, which is another podcast that I'm a part of. If you want to hear an interview with her all about how this whole process got started, check out episode 27 of this podcast for more of that background. But we all came together, and the thing that I was the most impressed by, besides all the organization of it, that everything came together and we worked so well together as a team, but it was after everything was done. We took a minute after everything was done, and we sat down and we talked about what went well and what do we want to change for next year. In that moment, we said, awesome, this is great. We did such a great job. Woohoo! Now let's look at what can we do differently next year. And I think that is a step that we miss so many times when we're going through our redesign process. When we're planning out what we want to change, we spent a lot of time talking about what went well, but we don't take that immediate moment to reflect on what can we do differently next time. Now, we're reaching that point in the year where it's good and it's important to reflect on what went well. What in your redesign, if you're in the middle of redesign right now, what is going well? That's great. Pat yourself on the back for those successes. Acknowledge those wins. But what you can't do is you can't get so caught up on those wins that you don't move forward. At a certain point, you have to stop patting yourself on the back and start looking at what's the next step. Stop thinking about what you've done, and you got to start thinking about what you're going to do next. And that's the place we get stuck in. We want to recognize the hard work that we put in, and we want to recognize what's going well. That's great. But that's only one half of the story. And so I would encourage you as you start to wrap up the year to think about what went well, but be looking to the future. And that's one thing I want to make sure I'm doing in my own classroom is not just looking at next year, but 5 years down the road. What do I want my classroom to look like? And what are the steps that are going to get me there? Because it's easy to think about the short term, but we got to start making some of these long-term goals. And that's where I think sometimes this redesign process can stall out, is if you're constantly just looking at the next step, you're never going to get to that big, long end goal. And now is a good time to reflect on, okay, what was our end goal that we decided on? And are we still on track to reach that long-term goal? So I'd encourage you, as you wrap up the year again, just think about what is your long-term goal you want to accomplish and what are the steps that it's going to take to get there. I hope you're having a great end of the year. I know I've got some things I still want to launch out this year. Portfolios is still my one thing that has eluded me all year. I've tried different versions of it, and I'm determined to get some sort of model done by the end of the year. So that's my short-term goal, because long-term down the road, I want my students to leave my classroom. So I'm thinking 3 years is a good time frame. By the end of the next 3 years, I'm committing that I want to make sure that my students leave my classroom with a portfolio of their work, a digital portfolio of their work that they can showcase. Now, what that looks like, what program they use for that, that's what I'm still working through. But that is my personal long-term goal for my students that I'm working towards, because I have some other goals for my students as far as wanting them to develop reading habits and writing habits and those sorts of things. But the one that I'm really trying to hone right now is that portfolio goal. So I want to know, what is your goal? What is the one thing that you want to work on and improve on? Let me know about it. You can find me on Twitter at teachlikeaninja. You can email me at teachlikeaninja@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram and, shocker, at teachlikeaninja. Also, check out my website. A huge shout out goes to my wife, who is going through her master's program. She is currently a 5th grade teacher at Washington Elementary, but she is in the middle of her grad school project, and her big project was redesigning my website and my social media campaigns and all of that. And so definitely check out my revamped website. It looks amazing. It's mrstockrocks.com. For additional resources, please reach out to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you. That was one thing that I enjoyed about EdCamp, was I got to talk to other teachers who are going through similar experiences that I've gone through with redesign, and to talk with them about that. One thing I want to start coming up soon is I'm going to try to come up with a weekly question of what would you change in this area? Because I think collectively together we can make some radical changes to education. But a lot of times we just don't know what we don't know. We don't know those ideas that are just amazing but might be stuck in one school that's doing it really great. I want to know that idea. I want to amplify, magnify those ideas to everyone else. Now, to wrap up this episode, I've got one final request. I am still in the process of collecting for a project I've been working on for the past 5 years. Every year, I collect money through an Olathe Public Schools Foundation grant. Basically, the way it works is if you want to donate money to this project, the Olathe Public Schools Foundation is an organization that when we do fundraising projects like this, it goes through them. It just makes it, I like it because it gives clarity to what the project is and how it's going to be funded. And so if you donate to the project, it will help purchase books for students in the district who may not have access to books on their own. My goal is to get 500 books to schools all across the district. Last year, we gave books to over 16 different elementary schools in the district. These are great kids, but they don't necessarily have the opportunity to buy a brand new book on their own. And so I want to get books into their hands, because we all know that the greatest way to improve reading comprehension is to give kids books to read. So thank you. On that note, you can find the link to this in the show notes for the Olathe Public Schools Foundation grant. Thank you for listening to this podcast, supporting this podcast, if you have a minute, go to iTunes and give this a rating, because the more ratings I get on the podcast, the more it moves up, the more it's shared out with others. Please, if you enjoy what you heard, share it with someone else who could benefit from this message. But go out there, do something amazing. Until next time, book it forward and be awesome.